Right, Yevamos Daf Tes Zion. So today's actually a pretty cool daf. If you remember yesterday, we listed off, I forget if it was, up to 10 proofs pretty much that showed that Beis Shammai acted out their own opinions and didn't just hold them, but follow Beis Hillel. And the final proof that we said, I don't think I covered it in yesterday's recording. That's where I stumbled a little bit, but one of the proofs is that it was said that in the time of Reb Joseph and Hyrcanus, there was an incident in which case someone, a daughter's co-wife, married or ended up doing Yibum and married the living brother. So that was like the proof. See, Beis Shammai is actually like their opinion is actually being followed. So today's stuff, we start off by analyzing that story a little bit. What was the case? Because we know that Beis Hillel's Shita is who we follow, so how could this be? So the Gemara talks about there's a task force that was created, pretty much. Who's going to go confront Rabbi Dosa about this? He was very old, he couldn't see, he made this, he wasn't even in the base measure, so they couldn't really fight him in the battlefield. They had to go to his house. So Rabbi Yoshua, who was the Basin at the time, he went. Rabbi Shua, Rabbi Akiva went, and Rabbi Eliezer, who was the Nasi. Those are the three people who were assigned to go. They show up at his house. They're ready to challenge him. The Gemara talks about how he accorded honor, but he was so old that he didn't even know who these people were. Rabbi Akiva, which is pretty astonishing because we know them as the legends that they are today, but he didn't know who they were. And then they basically said, they challenged him. They said, how could you say this? You know that we follow Beis Hillel. And he said, it wasn't me, it was my brother. But be very careful because he knows his stuff, my brother. So you gotta watch out. So they split up into three, whether it be because they wanted to, they didn't want him to convince all of them at once, or because they wanted to increase the chance of finding him. But regardless, Rabbi Akiva confronts him, and ultimately Rabbi Yonasan ben Hyrcanus, that's his brother, was able to successfully, convince or debate Rabbi Akiva that in fact we do hold Beis Shammai, which is pretty wild. But just taking one step back on the story, when Dosa ben Hyrcanus was saying, "Trust me, I believe like Beis Hillel also," he said, not only do I believe like Beis Hillel, but I have a Masorah from Chagai HaNavi, who's one of the Treyaser, three things that he said that were revolutionary. One of them is that in such a case, Sarah, the co-wife of a daughter, Sarah's Bita, they call it, is not eligible to do Yibum. That's one. The second case is that the lands of Ammon and Moab are eligible for Meiser Ani. I'll explain what that means in a moment. And the third thing is that we do not accept Gerim. We do accept Gerim from the lands of, sorry, the names are kind of strange, from Karduyim and from Tarmudim. So we do accept Gerim from these places. So those are the three things that Rav Dosa had heard or transmitted from Chagai HaNavi. That's the end of the story there. Rabbi Akiva was sort of dismantled, so to speak, and the Gemara doesn't pursue that. But then the Gemara kind of moves on to talk about, well, what's so revolutionary about Meiser Ani being allowed to be taken in lands of Ammon and Moab? Gemara explains that in the times of the first conquering of the Jewish people by Yeshua, those lands were all part of Israel. But then when they were exiled to Bavel, when they came back, those lands were intentionally unconquered. And the reason why is because they were left available for during Shemitah years that the Aniyim could still go there and collect their Meiser Ani. Because remember, you're only giving Meiser Ani off of your crops from your field. So if there are no fields during Shemitah, then it affects them as well. So this kind of gives them extra Meiser. The last incident, or the last prophecy that we learned from Chagai Navi had to do with accepting converts. So the first thing Gemara does is it says not Karduyim, which is something that we know you can't really accept. Rather, Kartuyim is who we're talking about here. And the reason why we don't really want to accept from them, and the Talmudim as well, is because they're suspected of being mamzerim. What does it mean, mamzerim? So the Gemara, there's a machlokes, Rav Yochanan and Sabieh, of why would they be considered mamzerim. One option is because they were the Avdei Shlomo slaves. They were very wealthy slaves. Shlomo apparently took care of his workforce, and they were affluent enough to take Jewish women. And so the offspring of those women lived in this, in the same place, and they were suspected of being mamzerim. Second opinion is that they were Benos Yerushalayim, meaning when the first Beis Hamikdash was conquered, then there were a lot of, some of the soldiers, instead of going after the gold, they went after the women, and, the typical rape that goes along with, battles led to a lot of illegitimate offspring. And those people lived in these lands, and that's why it was generally you're not supposed to take from those lands, but Chagai said it was okay. Just because we were talking about what happened during Churban Bayis Rishon, so the Gemara segues to expound upon some psukim. One of them is Nara Yisi V'gam Zekanti V'lo Tzaddik Nezav. What does that mean, Nara Yisi V'gam Zekanti? Who's talking here? Hashem's talking? Hashem doesn't get old. He doesn't get young. David HaMelech never really got so old, right? Especially when he was running to Tehillim, he wasn't that old. So who are we referring to here? The Gemara ultimately says it refers to there's one key angel who Hashem delegates the day-to-day responsibilities of this world, and he was the one who was created during the first days of creation, so he technically got old, and that was the one. That was an interesting exposition. Also, in the pasuk says Yodo Paras Tzara Kol Machmadeh, which is an echa, which basically means Hashem basically made all these surrounding. There's a Yodo Paras Tzara Kol Machmadeh, and also Tziva Hashem Yaakov Saviv Tzarav. These different psukim that basically indicate that Hashem created this anti-Semitism that's unnatural, that will follow the Jews and persecute them. Interesting exposition. I don't want to go into it so much, but we end off by a statement by Rabbi Yehuda by Rav Asi, which basically is that intermarriage nowadays, in Eretz Yisrael, or not even in Eretz Yisrael, but we suspect that they're valid marriages. Why? Because we know that Sennacherib came and sent away the 10 tribes. So any time that we marry you marry a non-Jew, there's potential that he really has Jewish roots. So we specified, no, it's not talking about any cases, because that's batul. There's so many. The majority is clearly not Jewish. Rather, it's saying there are certain lands that the Torah talks about where if you marry a non-Jew from those places, we suspect that it might be a valid kedushin, because those people could potentially be one of the 10 lost tribes. And this concludes Yevamos Daf Zayin. Tomorrow we will finish B'ezras Hashem the first parak and begin the second parak of Yevamos.